Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Now, can you imagine waking up one day, then being diagnosed with a condition that puts you into a wheelchair for the rest of your life? Although Wikipedia lists multiple sclerosis as an incurable disease, today we're here with a remarkable woman who was sentenced to a life in a tilt-recline wheelchair with progressive MS, and then went on to defy her diagnosis and reverse her condition with real food and lifestyle intervention. Today, Dr. Terry Wahls bikes to work, speaks all over the country, and teaches others how to heal conditions commonly considered to be untreatable with cutting-edge science and a good old healthy dollop of common sense. Now, before we get to the interview, I wanted to mention something that's a little bit concerning. I read a variety of articles that came out today and have been for some time that basically say that platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Pinterest, Instagram, etc. are all now openly censoring content and openly throttling some content to make sure that it's never seen. They say that they're doing this to prevent misinformation from getting out there. Now, normally that would sound like a good thing, right? Except some of my content is being censored. Some of our content is being throttled and disappearing from these platforms. And who's to say what we can and cannot talk about, right? So Terry Wahls is a wonderful example of someone who at the beginning was thought of as someone who was dangerous, right? Because her message was a bit different from the status quo. And now as we get into in the interview, she's seen more as a visionary who's really here to help and also integrating science into what she's doing through some of these different studies and clinical trials and all this wonderful work that's happening. Except you would never know about it if her talk was censored by TED, right? If this show that she was on were censored by whatever platform you're listening through right now, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Amazon, Facebook, all those, they're all censoring content. Okay, so it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. All I'm saying is that if we mysteriously disappear, someone like Terry or someone like me, who we've been doing this for a long time, asking a lot of questions. And if you're looking for us and we don't appear on whatever platform you're using on the internet anymore, go direct to the source. Find our actual websites. TerryWahls.com, right? AbelJames.com, FatBurningMan.com. Go direct to the source, and I encourage you to do that as well with this show, because that means you're not getting outside advertising, which is often, I mean, people understand that it's quite manipulative these days. The advertising that knows who you are and follows you all around the internet, a little creepy. And also, I do not consent to any of the advertising that's put onto our content from outside sources on those other platforms. And also, I really have no control over that. So suffice it to say, go direct to the source. If there are people who you have been following for a while and you trust them, make sure that, if they're doing it for the right reasons, you'll still be able to find them somewhere. So you might have to look a little harder, especially about certain topics, but I think any question should be fair game. We should be able to talk about anything, and I'll do my best to continue that, but you can always find me at fatburningman.com and abeljames.com. All right, before we get to the interview, here's a review that just came in from RX7 Heaven. Love those RX7s. I started out trying to lose weight for a challenge at work, and I knew I had to get information about food and health as quickly as possible. I stumbled across this podcast by chance, and my life and family has been changed. I lost 42 pounds in 9 weeks, and my wife, kids, parents, brother, and coworkers are all following the wild diet now too, shedding fat and getting healthy. Thank you, Abel and Allison. Man, thank you so much for, I don't know what your real name is, but RX7 Heaven, and thank you also for spelling both of our names correctly, Allison and Abel. That doesn't actually happen as often as you'd think it would. But man, 9 weeks, 42 pounds. That's cool, but I think the coolest thing is that you're getting your friends, family, and coworkers involved because, man, in times like these, we really need to band together as health nuts because the world isn't necessarily encouraging healthy choices for us. So, I do the show because I want to clear up some of the misinformation out there. I want to ask people who know what they're talking about deep questions about things. So, I really appreciate you folks who help support this show because it makes all this possible. I couldn't do any of this without you on the other side, even if it's just listening and sharing with your friends and you never, support us monetarily or anything like that. Totally cool. Thank you so much. Anything that you can do, leaving a review where you're listening or just recommending a show to a friend, whether it's me or some other health person who you trust. I just thank you so much for helping to spread the word because it's, we can't really rely on the platforms and the internet to do that for us. It needs to be word of mouth, real people talking to real people about things that matter to them. So all of you real people out there, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting this show. And if you'd like to support it, leave a quick review. You can also check out fatburningman.com. Sign up for the newsletter. That's a great way to keep in touch. Check out our store. We've got plenty of educational programs to get you fit as a fiddle, including our Wild 30 fat loss system, where we share 30 days of foodie-friendly meals that are designed to help you drop fat with real food. And we do our best to make the meal plans easy to make. And they're literally the meals that Allison and I eat to maintain our own optimal health. And you'll get a bonus 30-day meal plan. So 2 of those to keep you going past the initial month. You'll get quick start guides, motivation journals to track your progress, and much, much more. And right now, you can save an extra $20 off the whole package by going to fatburningman.com and save 20. So SAVE 20 after that /. You'll get instant access to everything and you can download and print it right now. Just go to fatburningman.com/save 20. All right, I'll see you there. And also, if you haven't heard about it yet, Wild Superfoods is our new family venture that we're using to help get people healthy and get the best, highest quality health supplements you can, while also supporting this show and making sure that we can continue to do it. So every purchase from wildsuperfoods.com directly supports this show. So if you live in the US, make sure to check that out too. All right, on to the show with Dr. Terry Wahls. You'll learn about the body's remarkable ability to heal itself and defy the odds, why more than a dozen new scientific studies are testing food as medicine, the new documentary dedicated to Dr. Wahls' journey from rebel to visionary, and tons more. All right, let's go hang out with Dr. Wahls. All right, folks, returning to the show today is our friend Dr. Terry Wahls. Dr. Wahls is a functional medicine practitioner, clinical researcher, and professor of medicine at the University of Iowa. Though she's at the forefront of functional medicine, what sets Dr. Wahls apart is her experience using nutrition and lifestyle interventions to treat progressive health problems and heal her own MS and later that of others. Also joining us today is Caroleen Moise, the producer and director of Defying All Odds, a new documentary featuring the story of Dr. Wahls' astonishing recovery from progressive MS. Welcome back, Dr. Wahls, and thanks so much for joining us, Caroleen.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
So, Terry, we've had you on the show a few times now, but there are still, I'm sure, people who are listening who aren't familiar with your story, which is becoming more and more interesting as the years go by. So could you just catch us up a little bit? And then, Caroleen, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So I'm an academic internal medicine physician, which means I teach at a major university. And at that time, I was a very skeptical physician. I taught my patients and my resident physicians to be very skeptical of diet, supplements, complementary alternative medicine. But God has a mysterious way of working. In 2000, I began to have problems stumbling and was ultimately evaluated with the MRIs of my brain, my spinal cord, a spinal tap, and was found to have abnormal lesions in my spinal cord, abnormal spinal fluid, and a diagnosis of relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis was made. I knew I wanted to treat my disease aggressively, so I sought out the best MS center that I could find, which was the Cleveland Clinic. I saw the best people, took the newest drugs, but I went steadily downhill. In 2002, my Cleveland Clinic physicians told me about the work of Laurent Cordain. I read his books, his papers, and after 20 years of being a vegetarian, I adopted a paleo diet, giving up all grain, all dairy, all legumes. But unfortunately, I continued to decline. The following year, I needed a tilt-recline wheelchair. My disease converted to secondary progressive MS. And in that stage of the disease, you expect things to get progressively worse. I took mitoxantrone, which is a form of chemotherapy. I continued to decline. Then I took Tysabri, a biologic drug. I continued to decline. Then I was placed on CellCept. At that point, I went back to reading the basic science and would decide that mitochondrial dysfunction was key. And so I created a supplement cocktail to support my mitochondria. I slowed down the speed of my decline, and for that I was very, very grateful. By the summer of 2007, I was so weak I could not sit up in a regular chair. It was a struggle to walk 10 feet using 2 walking sticks. I had progressive brain fog, and I was having problems with severe trigeminal neuralgia. It was that summer I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I took their course on neuroprotection and had a bigger list of supplements that I was taking. And then in the fall of that year, I had another big aha moment, like I should redesign my diet and lifestyle specifically based on what I had learned with functional medicine. That was some more research. And now I have a very structured paleo diet. I went back to my daily meditation. And the speed of change was remarkable. Within 3 months, I'm up out of the wheelchair, walking with a cane. In 6 months, I'm walking without a cane. In 9 months, I get on my bike and I bike around the block, the first time in a decade. And in 12 months, I'm able to do an 18.5-mile bike ride with my family. Now, this changes how I understand disease and health. It would change the focus of my clinical practice, and it would ultimately change the focus of my research. I switched my previous research to this new area of studying diet and lifestyle to treat multiple sclerosis and other chronic progressive diseases.
Wow. Now, Caroleen, I'd love to hear a bit more about your project, but also the why behind why Terry and why her story.
If you allow me, I'll tell you a little story quickly. So essentially, I've been filmmaking for almost 14 years now. I started with fiction, and I was doing short films. And at some point, I became paleo 7 years ago. So that would be 2012. And I was so transformed by, this new lifestyle and this way of living that I wanted to tell everyone. I wanted to convert everyone. And I was, always, I would meet someone and straight, from the get-go, I'd be like, do you know about this new way of living, paleo? It's amazing. You cut the grains out, the dairy, blah, 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 you'll feel better. But, after a while, I realized that not everyone is interested in improving their health. So essentially, I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I ought to do my first feature. I always thought it was going to be fiction, but I think it's going to be a documentary about this lifestyle, because you've got to be very passionate about your topic when you take on such an endeavor, because it's going to be with you for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. So I thought, you know what? I love this enough. I'm going to do this. And and my co-producer and I decided to make We Love Paleo, which is also distributed under the name Love Paleo. And in the process of making this film, it was Kane Credicott from Paleo Magazine who said, hey, you ought to look Dr. Terry Wahls up, because she's amazing and she'd be great for your documentary. And I thought, you know what? Okay, we've got everyone in the documentary. We already had 13 people. I thought that was more than enough. I looked her up. I delved into it, and I was like, wow, this incredible woman deserves her own film. Not like, she can't just be like an expert, in my film for like a total of 5 minutes. That's not going to work. And so I put it aside, and I was, to be honest, I was like eyeball deep into my current project. So there's no room in my mind to even contemplate, what that second film would be. I wasn't even finished with the first one, but I knew in my heart that, if it was meant to be, it was going to happen. And so after, being picked up by a US distributor, which galvanized me and confirmed that, yes, this was, it was the right thing to do at the time, this first project, I decided to reach out to Dr. Terry Wahls. I thought, this deserves its own film. And I was feeling so grateful as I've got to call her quickly before someone else gets the idea. To me, it was obvious that she ought to have her own film because the journey is incredible.
It is. And Terry, to your point, it changes the way that we think about disease and healing in particular. But I'd love to get your perspective on what, not that there's a breakdown, but since you have both sides, mind versus matter, like how did you manage that during your healing and how are you managing that now?
Well, as I was going steadily worse and worse and worse, I kept having to reimagine my life as a more disabled individual and how was I going to help my kids ultimately learn how to be successful adults. And I had gotten to a place of acceptance, like, I'm going to become bedridden. I'm going to become possibly demented. I was struggling with that I may have refractory uncontrolled trigeminal neuralgia, which is this electrical zings of pain every time you have sensory input. That was tough to come to terms with. I had no hope of recovery. When I had read through what I learned from functional medicine, from the ancestral health movement, I was doing all of that to slow my decline because I had accepted what my physicians had told me, and what I had learned is that when you have progressive MS, it only gets worse. There is no recovery, no spontaneous recovery. And so as I implemented what I was learning, and as I redesigned my paleo diet, and as I added electrical stimulation to my muscles, I was doing that to try and walk the little bit of walking I was still doing for a few more months. I didn't think I was going to recover. And what's remarkable is, so I have recovered remarkably. I'm walking with a cane again. I'm walking around the block, but I'm still, because I had accommodated to that progressive MS only progresses, that I was just taking each day as it unfolded. I didn't really know what any of that meant. It wasn't until the day I got on my bike and I biked around the block, I'm crying, my wife's crying, my kids are crying. If you could see me closely, I'm crying now too, because I always get emotional thinking back to that day, because that was the day that it was apparent to me that who knew how much recovery might be possible, that in fact, I might get much closer to normal function than anyone would understand, in that the current conventional understanding of multiple sclerosis, of progressive multiple sclerosis, is incomplete. That likely there is considerable recovery that is possible, that our oligodendrocytes can repair, that we can rebuild synapses, and that we can rewire past the damage in our spinal cord and in our brain. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it's a natural part of the process when you have a progressive disease, is that you go through anger, denial, bargaining, and you finally get to a place of acceptance that this is your current reality, and you just take each day as it unfolds.
And one thing I actually read today, and I didn't look into it to great detail, but around the lifestyle factors, being excited about paleo and ancestral, but also thinking about how it affects your health. The headline of the study said that drinking soda makes MS worse, makes the symptoms measurably worse. And not that there's one perfect study or that that's a perfect example, but it does lend a little more ammunition and oomph behind the fact that we have some amount of control over our symptoms, no matter what we might be struggling with.
No, absolutely. Certainly the evidence is slowly building that there are many elements of our diet and lifestyle that influence disease activity. The amount of salt in the diet, the amount of vegetables in the diet, the amount of white food, processed foods, the amount of food additives, all have an impact on relapse rate, on brain volume, on quality of life, on disability scores. There's when I was first launching my study, my very first dietary intervention study in 2009, I was the only one doing a dietary intervention study for MS at that time. Swank had done a observational study, a cohort study, but no one else had done that. Then Vijay did a dietary intervention study. But now, my colleagues are catching up. And in fact, I was just back at clinicaltrials.gov, and there are 13 intervention studies that are going on right now. And that's very exciting. And we're looking at a wide variety of diets, gluten-free, low glycemic index, ketogenic diets. Of course, I'm doing paleo diets. There's low saturated fat diets. It's very exciting that we're now beginning to really look at that. The impact of food.
Yeah, where we're coming from, not even so long ago, doctors were saying diet doesn't matter; it has no effect on your body. It's like that was the common knowledge somehow.
That was absolutely common. When my TED Talk went viral back in 2011, and patients were going to the physician saying, "Well, what about that TED Talk? What about that physician?" And I'm sure thousands of neurologists, probably hundreds of thousands of neurologists, were having to deal with their patients coming in saying, "What about food?" And in 2011, they were saying food didn't matter. Mm-hmm. But now that we're getting the basic science down, we understand that food turns genes on and off. Food affects our microbiome. Food affects the cytokine levels. And we have more epidemiologic evidence linking food, diet quality, and disability status, brain volume, and lesion load. Now, more and more of the neurologists are saying, well, yes, food does matter, and the quality of your diet does matter. So it's a very exciting time. And to my colleagues who think this is a very rapid time period. In just 10 years, we've gone from food doesn't matter to the scientists saying food matters a great deal, to the clinicians who are now beginning to agree, yes, food matters a great deal.
And in those clinical trials, it sounds like potentially using food as medicine in science itself, right?
Yes. These are food-based dietary intervention studies. Most of the previous dietary studies were supplement studies, using fish oil, using a particular supplement, green tea extract. Now, finally, and it's much harder to do a food-based study. It's a different kind of science, but I'm very excited to see that is happening. And part of the reason it's happening is that when I wrote my book, The Wahls Protocol, and it became a bestseller, that drove public awareness, interest. It created a lot of momentum, and the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, bless them, because they follow their constituents and what they do in social media. They saw this huge interest and demand and expectation. So they did make dietary research, food-based dietary research, a research priority. And so they funded some of these early pilot studies, which then allowed for investigators like myself to use those pilot studies to write for bigger grants, which now are why there are 13 intervention studies that are registered in the clinicaltrials.gov.
So for people who are out there wondering if it's worth it to try to clean up their nutrition plan or their way of eating or their lifestyle, I mean, what would you have to offer them to get them over that hump? Because it's not easy. But for you, I mean, what an incredible example that is of the other side.
Well, I think all of us want to have our brains working really well, into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 90, and 100. We'd like our body to be working well. We don't want to become demented and so frail that we have to live in a nursing home. And your best strategy for that is to eat these radical things known as vegetables, to eat high quality protein. Meat is a good source, and to get rid of sugar, to get rid of the high glycemic index foods, a lot of these flour-based products, and to get outside, walk around, be out in the sunlight. These lifestyle interventions are really quite profound. And there's a growing body of evidence that this is the most effective intervention that we have to lower my rate of early cognitive decline, to lower my rates of obesity, to lower my rates of diabetes, to lower my rates of mental health problems. And so I care much more about my health span than my lifespan. I want to live to 100 in great health, being able to play with my kids and my grandchildren. I don't want to live to 100 and be demented for the last 20 years. That's not a very satisfying life. And I think most of the American public would feel the same way.
I'm curious how clean, as the years go by, and that's not the right word for it, obviously, but how strict or dogmatic do you have to keep your own lifestyle and eating habits?
Oh, I mean, for me personally?
Yeah.
So if I am exposed to gluten, dairy, or eggs, within 6 to 24 hours, my trigeminal neuralgia turns on, and I have horrific, incapacitating jolts of electrical face pain. So that keeps me very attentive to my diet.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of toxin exposure, probably the most toxic thing I do is fly. Because you when you're flying, you're going to be involved in pesticides, insecticides that are in planes to keep the vermin out of the planes, the radiation from the altitude, and the aerosolized jet fuels that get recycled through the cabin as part of the exhaust. So if I fly once a month, I do okay. If I fly twice a month, I'm more likely to have increased neuropathic pain. So I have to pay a lot of attention to my own detox protocols, taking saunas, and taking my detox supplement interventions. And I'm also very mindful to work at my stress-reducing practices, because I am so excited about the stuff that I'm doing, the research that I'm doing, the manuscripts that we're writing, the revisions to my book, all of that stuff. It's hard to sleep at night because I'm so excited. I'm so in love with my work. In fact, in order to sleep well at night, I have to be very intentional about meditating every evening to quiet my mind enough to fall asleep.
Wow. One other thing I'd like to talk about, Terry, you mentioned this before we started recording, and actually it'd be better if you described it because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but describing how the world was perceiving you maybe 10 or so years ago compared to now. What's changed?
Yeah, so here at the university and at the VA where I was working, people saw me go from walking around, being fairly athletic, to becoming more and more fragile, being in the tilt-recline wheelchair. And then they see this stunning recovery, and people are very excited about that. But then I changed how I practice medicine, and I'm talking more and more about vegetables, about sleep, about exercise, and less about drugs. And my partners are nervous about that, and so they're complaining. So I have to go meet with my chief of staff and the head of medicine to explain. And then and he's not quite sure what I'm doing, but I come back with my papers, and they decide that, okay, I'm eccentric, but he's assuring everyone that if I hurt anyone, I'll go through peer review just like everyone else, but my recommendations are probably what we should all be recommending. So I'm being viewed as this eccentric oddity. Some people think I'm a little dangerous because I'm not doing drugs. I'm just doing these diet and lifestyle. But at best, very eccentric. But then, my clinical results are remarkable in the traumatic brain injury clinic. The VA takes me out of primary care, and we create the therapeutic lifestyle clinic. And I go to the pain clinic and primary care and say, give me your most difficult patients. Let them know they're just going to get diet and lifestyle. But I'm happy to take your most difficult people who have the most refractory pain. And we have remarkable success. And then we've got our clinical trials going. And every year at the research week, we're presenting the results from our trials. And we're beginning to get our papers published, remarkably positive. And then we start getting larger grants. And so now I'm presenting my data to grant rounds at the various departments across the university. And the university is getting gifts to the Wahls Research Fund because other philanthropists are cold calling the university saying, we're so excited by the work that Dr. Wahls is doing, we'd like to support her research lab.
Wow. And
so I've gone from this eccentric oddity to now being seen as this brilliant visionary. So it's very exciting. And it's a very short period of time. It's only 10 years.
For the visionaries who are listening right now who may not be accepted as such, what advice do you have for them?
Well, if you can, if you're a clinician, get case reports written up, write case series, try and get some partners to do a small feasibility study to show that others can implement this intervention and show its safety. We need the published peer-reviewed literature. And so if you aren't a researcher, that's fine. Just get a case report written up from what you're seeing and get a case series. That is incredibly important, powerful stuff. And it helps build the case for the researchers like myself because we can use that in our grants.
What are some of the most exciting things that you've learned recently that may have surprised you?
Well, who knew our poop could be so valuable? I remember, when I was a medical student and as a trainee and resident, we made so much fun of our geriatric patients who would tell us that if I could just have a bowel movement, I knew I'd feel so much better, doc. And we'd laugh at them. But of course, now I think back, but those people were so very wise because they're right. If we could rebalance their microbiome so they could have a daily bowel movement, they in fact would be much healthier. That it's the microbes in our gut that digest the food I eat and the byproducts of the other microbes that make the metabolites, the smaller molecules that will get into our bloodstream. And those molecules help us run the chemistry of our life. And it's probably these metabolites that are the mechanisms by which food has such a huge impact on health status. It's the microbial metabolites from digesting that food. And I think there will be a time as you get better and better at analyzing really big data that I'll be able to go in and give a specimen of blood, so you get my DNA, a specimen of stool to get my microbes' DNA and the metabolites in the stool. And then we'll be able to generate a very specific report to say, you know what, you're somebody who will not tolerate saturated fat. You should be on a Mediterranean high olive oil diet. Or you're somebody who do very well on a ketogenic diet, and you might do great with a lot of coconut milk, coconut oil. Or you're going to be someone who would do much better on a very low saturated fat diet. But to have that kind of very specific information will require our ability to get your DNA, your microbial DNA, your microbial metabolites. And then if we could also add another layer to have some prediction on what food sensitivities and food allergies you might develop, that then we could get finally a really comprehensive picture. And how far away are we from that? I don't know, maybe 10 years, maybe 15. Mm-hmm. It'll come. It'll come.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully we'll start to use technology more as a tool. But I'm also curious, especially with all of the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G, EMF, how does that enter into the electrical part of all of this?
Well, that's another area of controversy. Is that a big health issue or not? I say that science is not clear yet. Mm-hmm. I'm inclined to have a lot of concerns that, at least for some of us, that's going to have some adverse biologic effects. So in my clinical practice, I have people address diet, address stress reduction, address movement, address sleep, and then tell them if they're still having problems and you've addressed all those things, then the next things to think about are your technology around you. Think about dirty electricity. Think about EMF. Turn off your routers. Think about shielding around yourself. And also think about spending more time outside grounded. And I certainly admit that this is unknown science. But if you've been doing everything you can in the other aspects of your life mm-hmm. and are still symptomatic, this is another area where you could align things more closely to what our ancestral mothers and fathers would have experienced.
Yeah, another big blind spot that people seem to have, including myself, is the air quality, because that's certainly an input in many of our lives. I got one of those little Bluetooth sensors that matches up with my phone, and I've been just astonished by especially indoor quality or lack of quality of air, just off the charts.
And what we forgot or didn't realize is, as we make our homes more and more energy efficient and tighter, so there's less air circulation. Now the off-gassing from all the synthetic products mm-hmm. Become a larger and larger and larger problem. So that's given me some pause as I thought about adding more insulation to my house and making my house tighter. I'm like, well, I don't know. Do I really want to do that or not? I think that's a very big issue. And all the forest fires mm-hmm. and the change in air quality that happens because of the forest fires and the change in water because of the water contaminations mm-hmm. and the amount of pharmaceuticals that are in the wastewater because it's such a large swath of our population is taking multiple drugs.
Yeah. Well, taking multiple everything from almost all directions is what it yes. seems like. But how do you manage all of this and not lose your mind?
Well, just like I do everything else, you just do the best you can. I have people start with one big intervention at a time. Okay. So generally in my clinical practice, I have them start with diet. Although we do have some folks in my lifestyle clinic, in my primary care clinics, they couldn't do diet. And so I have a conversation with them like, okay, what in your lifestyle can you start with? And it might have been exercise, putting on a step counter. It might have been a meditative practice. But I ask everyone to start somewhere in the diet and lifestyle. I may have an opinion that I think diet's the biggest payoff for them. But if it's not where they're at, then I ask them, well, where are you? What could you tackle? And then work from there. Yeah.
So you kind of iterate.
We iterate. And I also believe deeply in motivational interviewing in terms of you have to grow the person's internal motivation. You need to find out what they're willing to do. I can educate, inspire, offer hope, explain the mechanisms by which these interventions can work, and then ask them, based on all that, what are you willing to do next? And then we take it from there.
Great. Now, to shift gears a little bit, I'm curious to go back around those 10 years before you had been accepted as someone who was really doing great work that should be embraced. What advice would you have for people who are dealing with the amount of negativity in the online space these days, or just, in the appendage that is our phone now? How do you deal with that, and how do you persevere?
Well, there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people who are intensely skeptic. So there was a fellow who just wrote an intensely negative article about me in his online space, and someone alerted it to me. So I contacted him from my university email, And I sent him a couple of my papers. And I said, I'd be happy to chat with you and your audience. Because I had some scientific papers, and I did this from a science standpoint, he in fact invited me on to his radio show, and we had a lovely conversation. He was a bit skeptical and sort of abrupt at times, but I kept affirming the things that we could agree on in terms of how science should be done and the usual processes, and we could find common agreement, and we could find areas where more research was needed. And so my advice is find scientific articles that back your point of view and send your critic that and refer them to science. If they're not interested in science, just let it blow off, let go of it. But if you can continue to use scientific studies, that usually is a place where we're willing to agree.
What's the best source for people who may not be in science but are interested in the research? What's the best, layperson's guide or
when I Google articles, and you can see a lot of articles showing up in Google, and then if I look for if they don't have any footnotes, I throw it away. I'm not interested. If they have footnotes and they quote references that I can find in PubMed, okay, then I think it's useful. If they can't quote any footnotes that reference a study in PubMed, I throw it away. And the PubMed.gov is a searchable database for any of us. We can go to PubMed.gov, type in your areas of interest, so like microbiome and your disease state of interest. You'll see that there's lots of research, and you can sort of scan through. You could look for review articles with your topics. That will give you a high-level discussion.
It seems like the internet mostly deals with low-level discussions, but and actually you can kind of see that showing up in what's happened to ancestral health over the years. It seems like a lot of people have kind of missed the deeper conversations, the deeper exploration of what this all means. Instead, people are just like, I'm carnivore now, or I'm keto, or whatever. But like, how can we be a little bit more responsible with this in a world that tempts us to be otherwise?
Well, people, we have a lot of time pressure, so we always want to go to the shortest, easiest answer. And we're always going to be fighting that. My response is you'll want to look for scientific studies to explore and investigate and understand the mechanisms. It's a slower, more painful process, but if we're going to have forward progress, that's what's going to be required. And to that end, we have this amazing resource, PubMed.gov, that you can set up alerts to monitor the particular areas that you're interested in. And if you have a particular question, again, you could put in your terms of interest, and you could add in review or clinical trial to investigate this further. It really is the best way to get reliably sourced information.
Is there anything else you could offer about how to manage the anti-science sentiment or, the misinformation that abounds today?
Well, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. There's going to be a lot of antagonism. And for me, I just let it roll off my back. And when I choose to engage, I engage from my university email, and I send them my papers. Particularly people say, like, it was just Wahls. There's an N of 1. And I said my paper, say, no. You can decide that maybe it was an N of 1. Maybe my physicians were incompetent. What really matters is, is it reproducible? Is it reproducible in others? That's why the clinical trials, that's why science is so important. And that's why, I take my role so seriously, is to design the interventional studies and to test this prospectively. Does can it be reproduced, and can it be reproduced in others using randomized controlled studies?
Yeah. I'm glad that all of that is moving forward and that there are so many clinical trials, in the works right now. That is exciting.
It's very exciting stuff.
It's what we always wished for, isn't it? So it's not all getting worse. Some stuff is getting much better too.
There's a lot of stuff that's getting better.
So, Caroleen, to that point, what are you most excited about in terms of sharing Dr. Wahls' story?
Well, I think there's almost a misconception about neurological diseases, that they're not reversible. And Dr. Wahls, along with the many patients that she's treated, are proving otherwise. And that's very exciting to know that it's not just, your stock standard, illness or ill that you can actually reverse. There are diseases that are much more serious that you can have a direct impact on with lifestyle interventions. And that's all within your control. And I think that is a less known fact, so to speak. And I think that putting that out in the mainstream is an important thing to show that, well, look how sick she was. She was bedridden. And, this is something that affects the brain. One of the main organs in the body, the most complex thing in the universe, they say. So if she was able to reverse that to a certain extent with, her lifestyle intervention, what could it do for you at home watching this? And it doesn't necessarily needs to be MS, but I think it's important for people to see that such a grave disease was mostly eradicated.
And how empowering is that if it's done through your own action, not some outside surgeon or some pharmaceutical intervention? It's literally what you're doing in your own habits, in your own everyday life.
And this is why I chose as well this beautiful quote that, I go to bed at night thinking, oh, thank goodness I chose this as our tagline for the film. The power to heal lies within you. And this is from Terry's book. And it was so poignant when I read it. I was like, wow. And it's figuratively true, and it's also literally true. So, it had like a double entendre, as you say. And so I thought, this has to be the most, the most powerful quote in her book to me. And I want that on our poster, on our film poster. So it's now our official tagline.
And people have come back from so many things, whether it's just having a little bit of extra weight or serious diseases. It seems that we can all do something to improve our situations.
Absolutely. So in the film, we will have not many, but we have a few people that come in and speak to that and tell us how they've been recovering and finding their health again with the Wahls protocol. So I think that it was important for me to include that in the film as well, to show that it's not just a fluke. It's not just Terry who fluked out and got better and everyone else is doing worse. On the contrary. And I'm really happy and grateful, and I feel very privileged to be the filmmaker putting this story out. I mean, I admire this woman so much and her body of work and everything. I feel that this is tremendous, to be able to do that and reflect, not reflect, but maybe show people basically what she's done, but where she is at now as well in her life.
Yeah.
And so in the film, we will show many, if not most aspects of Dr. Wahls' life. It was important for me to show her not only, with her patients, but also at the university and when she's speaking. Namely, there's a beautiful segment at the IFM convention. So And then we have her in her garden, doing exercise. And so I don't want to reveal too much, but we see her in multiple facets of her life. And I thought this is important. We need to show that this is a normal person. Yes, she's a scientist. She's a very capable, intelligent woman. However, she's still a human being, and she has a personal life with her wife and family. And, she's doing things like all of us are. And again, it's all about showing that this is a normal person. You can do it too. You have the ability of taking things into your own hands.
Yeah. And man, the world just needs this more than ever. So I applaud both of you for moving this forward. But before we go, can you tell us how we can help and also where we can find your work?
If I may, I want to tell people that this is going to be a film like no other. I want to tell them that it's not your stock standard documentary with Terry talking to the camera and whatnot and some B-roll footage. It also has animations, as Abel, you might have seen in the trailer. So when she talks, she's explaining things, and we wanted to show people, we wanted to have a visual reference of what is a neuron, what is mitochondria. So we have superimposed animations being done, and that's being done by an award-winning animator that I found in Europe. And so we have all these things coming together, like flashbacks, because obviously we have photos and archival media. However, it wasn't enough to fully recount the story because it's so rich. So we needed to go back in time, and I said, well, let's do it. We're combining flashbacks and animations and a studio interview and, live action. And it's never been done before. I've looked for it. I couldn't find it. So to me, as a filmmaker, it was very important to, bring something unique, but also something that's coherent. And we're working on that right now. And I think it's going to be brilliant. I really do believe that it can be an amazing film. And again, we've never seen that done anywhere else in any other documentary. So it's going to be a feat in itself to achieve that. So I'm very, very excited. I could relate to Terry when she said sometimes she can't sleep at night because she's so excited. So it's the same for me. And so basically the film is crowdfunding right now on Indiegogo under Defying All Odds documentary. And so I can spell out the URL for you if you want. It's quite simple. It's igg.me/@/Defying All Odds movie. So all spelled out, Defying All Odds movie. And that's where they can find the film, which is crowdfunding until March 16. And we're halfway there. And we're not asking for a lot of money, actually. We're actually asking for $25,000 to complete the film because 60% of it is already shot and edited. And some people have asked me, how can you do a film for such little money? And the answer is, I'm the producer, director, but also the editor. And editing costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if you edit your own film and you color correct your own film, and you only use key people for the things that you don't know how to do, then it becomes much easier to keep the costs low. And so that's what we've done.
Right on. And Caroleen, I just want to say tip of the hat for, not going on Instagram and or Snapchat and just talking about whatever every day. You're taking on a big project and doing it for real in a time when, I don't know, the world doesn't necessarily encourage that, you know what I mean, from all directions. So just thank you for putting all that effort into such a project.
Thank you so much for saying that, because it is true that we seem to live in a world that's more and more and more shallow. And to be honest, I didn't know I had it in me, but I'm so passionate about this. I am so dead set about being in alignment with my purpose. And, no one cares if I want to make films, who cares? But the thing is, how much value can you bring to others? What's your purpose? How can you help your fellow human beings? And I found mine, and it's in putting these messages out and helping people see how much control they have on their own lives. I think that's very important. And And again, like I choose to do it with the medium of film, and that's what gets me most excited. The two passions combined into one, and following my purpose. That's, I think, what gives me that determination and perseverance. Yes. And I'm very privileged to be able to make this film. I can't wait to show it to the rest of the world.
I can't wait to see it. And Terry, before we go, what's the best place to find you and your work as well?
So find me at Terry Wahls, Terry, Wahls, WAHLS.com. And you can pick up a one-page summary of my diet at terrywahls.com/diet. And that'll really give you a great one-pager to put in your refrigerator and get you started with reclaiming your life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much to you both for taking on this project and doing the wonderful work that you're doing. I'd love to have you back on the show to see what movies you're making next. This episode is brought to you by Wild Superfoods. Let's start with a quick question. Do health supplements really work? After testing many hundreds of tonics, supplements, powders, and potions over the past 7+ years, my wife Allison and I have found very few companies that we actually trust. Massive, faceless corporations seem to be running the show, often prioritizing profits well above our collective health. Many supplements in stores and online are of extremely low quality, are ridiculously overpriced, and some don't even contain the active ingredient they're supposed to be selling. We all deserve much better. That's why my wife Allison and I created Wild Superfoods. We're a small family business, and we take our own products daily because we think they're the best out there. Our Ultimate Daily Bundle provides you with a complete supplement regimen that you can trust to deliver maximum health benefits without the guesswork. Whether you're looking for Mega Omegas, Vitamin D Stack, Probiotic Spheres, or Future Greens, our cutting-edge supplements have you covered. And as a listener of Fat Burning Man, you can save over $80 on a one-time purchase or save over $128 when you select Subscribe and Save. All you have to do is head on over to wildsuperfoods.com. You can type it into your address bar right now to order your very own health-boosting goodies for a rocking listener discount for a limited time. And as always, if you don't love any of our products from Wild Superfoods, then you get your money back. So one more time, all you have to do to check it out is visit wildsuperfoods.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you there. Well, hey there, listener. This is Abel one more time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to or watching this show right now. And if you have a second, please leave me a quick review for the Fat Burning Man Show. I read every single one of them, and every time you leave a review, it gives us a little boost in the rankings, and that helps other people find this show. And if you can think of someone else who might enjoy and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or a family member. And if they're like, what is this Fat Burning Man thing? That's a really silly name. You could be like, you're right, but here's the deal. We've recorded over 250 episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show with thought leaders in health from all over the world. And so far, we've won 4 awards, hitting #1 in health in more than 8 countries internationally. We have more than 30 million downloads already, but we're just getting started. I can't believe any of this, by the way, and couldn't do any of this without you, so thanks once again. But here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode of the Fat Burning Man Show for free with 0 outside advertisements, no outside sponsors, and no corporate overlords. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second here just to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes, transcripts, and video and audio versions for all the past episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show for free. Better yet, enter your email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide so you can take your health into your own hands right now, along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now Enter your best email to get your free goodies with a bonus surprise straight to your inbox. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening once again, and have a great week.